Welcome to the Strength Dojo. This video is going to be going over the planning process that I have implemented for the MS-150 ride that I'm going to be participating in. Now this ride is a fundraising thing for the MS-150, and one of the things that's going to be very important is raising money, right? And so one of the things that I have here is a lagging indicator for the minimum of $400 that I need to raise. So if you're watching this and you want to contribute to the MS-150, you can check out the link below and support the MS-150 and this charity ride that is done annually. And I'm doing it with Team Slavic Americas, which is the company that my wife works for. And so that's what this video, well, that's not what this video is about. This video is all about my approach to planning and training, and hopefully some of the things that I've laid out here is going to be helpful. What I'm looking to achieve, for me, the specific objective here is to be ride ready for the MS-150, which is on April 26th and 27th. The planning methodology, this is something that I've learned over the years that works really well for especially people who have any kind of executive dysfunction. A big part of that is object impermanence and time blindness. And one of the ways that I've addressed that is essentially having what I want to pursue in front of me in a place where I can see and be ready for it. Now, one of the things that really helps in getting clarity on what the objective is why is that objective important? What's in it for you, right? Objectively. And so what's the reason, what's the purpose behind knowing your why for the objective is going to help you achieve the results. Now, in my case, essentially some of the hopes that I have is to be able to connect with new people, to be part of a greater whole. It's an excuse for me to explore Richmond and Houston, spend more time with my kid, father-son time, riding the bike. This is, for anybody who might be wondering, this is a pre-caliber 12 from Trek. It's a relatively older model, it's a few years old, but they have several models of these, and you may notice that this has no bike pedals. And the reason for that is not having any bike pedals is an effective way of getting your kid to learn how to balance. And so once they learn how to balance, turn and things like that, then it's a good idea to put the pedals on. What I have here is a Trek Domani 4.3, I think. It's a bit of an old bike. It's over 10 years old. Now, normally carbon frame bikes, it is advised to replace them every decade. So I might do that in the near future. But for now, this bike has been good. I don't know how many thousands of miles I've driven this. I've driven this bike from New York City to Montreal. I used to use this as my daily commuter when I lived in DC prior to, I came to Houston in 2015. So prior to that, I was working in Washington, DC. And so this was my regular daily commuter for that. I think it was like anywhere between 10 to 15 miles a day. I would commute maybe 3 or 4 days a week regularly. And I would also use this bike for many of my rides just around the DC, New York, New Jersey area. Also took this, I didn't actually take this bike to the Vegas to LA ride. That was a different bike that I rented, but this bike also did the Houston to Austin ride in 2017. So I really, really like this bike. And one of the things you'll also notice is there's a little seat thing here that I've attached. So if I want to take my kid on the ride with me, instead of him riding his own bike, then this thing is really handy. I saw this as an ad on Instagram. I'm like, yo, this is great. So I bought that. But anyway, so the whole idea of spending more father-son time with the kids. Part of that, I said kids, right? So my first kid, he's already got his own bike. One of the things I definitely want to consider doing is getting some sort of attachment for my 1-year-old. So this way, all three of us could go on a ride together. The other thing that I'm looking at is exploring new ways to do any kind of storytelling. This video is for the StrengthDojo channel. One of the things I definitely want to do is I want to document the journey and the process. A big part of also documenting it on this channel is to raise awareness. Now, one of the major things that's driving me to actually do this ride is the last long ride that I did was the Vegas to LA ride. And I personally, it was a fail for me from a ride sense. It was a huge success in the sense of I was able to explore the storytelling and documentation side in terms of the skill in filmmaking and things like that for this channel. That was a huge success. But in terms of my ability to actually do the ride, it was my worst performance of all the rides that I've ever done. And that failure has kind of still stuck to me. And the key thing was that I had cramped out on the very first day of the ride, which was the first 16 miles. One of the things was Vegas was actually had record cold temperatures. It was like 27 degrees. I had 0 miles of ride prep. Now, did I prepare for the ride in other ways in terms of strength training and fitness and things like that? Yes, but in terms of time on the saddle, it was 0. And in fact, everybody that was in participation with that particular ride, it was the time on the saddle that someone spent was directly correlated with their success on the ride in terms of where they were amongst the group of 4 guys that were with us. Those who rode the most performed the best. That was essentially the key, the one thing that was a determining factor for readiness for a long distance ride. So how much time on the saddle, how much saddle time was spent. Now, the other thing that I was also dealing with was dehydration, and turned out that very ride at the end, I was actually COVID positive. I don't know if I got COVID on the ride or I had COVID, I just didn't know, but that's a whole different story. But now, this is the reason for me personally to do this ride. Now, the key results, measurable milestones, the training timeline, things that I've kind of put together here. The key thing that is going to determine my readiness is going to be how much saddle time am I getting in, and that's going to be directly related to now the way that I've measured saddle time is based on a checkpoint. One checkpoint is 10 miles, and if I calculate a slow pace of 10 miles an hour, that's 1 hour of saddle time. So that's just basically a measure for me to look at. Now, any ride that I do that is less than 10 miles does not hit the checkpoint, therefore it does not count. So the one ride that I did in the previous video must have been maybe 3 miles at most, and so for that reason it doesn't get counted toward the checkpoint target value. So the key thing here is for me to hit 36 checkpoints. That is what I believe would make me ride ready for the MS-150. If I can hit 36 checkpoints, i.e. 36 hours in the saddle, minimum, I'm thinking I gotta hit definitely 20 hours, right? But if I hit 36 checkpoints, then I know I'm gonna be ride ready. Now, one of the things to take into consideration is that whenever you're engaging in a new physical activity, there is a 14-day adaptation period, a 2-week adaptation period. And the reason for that is that's how long your body takes to adapt to a new activity. And so that's just something to keep in mind. If you've not done any kind of strength training or endurance training or cycling, then that first 2 weeks is going to be probably the roughest. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And so part of that, what I've also done is to support this key leading indicator for the key result of readiness with relation to saddle time. Then to support that, I've also added a target value of hitting 24 workouts, strength training specific workouts before the target date. And the other checkpoint that would enable me to actually do the ride is raising the minimum of $400 plus. I've already raised about $100. Thank you, Amr Kidwai, for that. We're at 25%, but obviously I want to definitely go past that, and I'll be raising the target goal as the numbers are increased. But one thing to keep in mind is that when it comes to like fundraising goals, that is what's called a lagging indicator. What that means is, so I started my career off in marketing and sales, specifically initially, even the earlier days, like knocking on doors, right, for door-to-door sales. Whether it was door-to-door sales, it was telemarketing, it was whatever it was, right? The sale itself is a lagging indicator, right? That doesn't determine the work that you put in. The question is, what is the work that you have to put in that would be leading to the result that you're seeking? So in the case of raising $400, you gotta convey, you gotta relay, you gotta communicate, you gotta advertise, you gotta share, generate awareness for the bike ride and everything. So in my case, what I've, in terms of the actual leading indicators, is reach out to 21 individual contacts personally, and ask them to not only support the ride, but to refer me to somebody that would also be willing to connect me to that. General sales thing: get the sale, i.e. in this case, get the support, and then get referrals to follow up with people. But started with 21 of my own personal contacts. Any additional stuff would be bonus from the referrals. The other thing is to produce 1 a week, 12 videos, essentially documenting my rides. So I might consider this as one of those videos, because this is also outlining a direct appeal for what I'm doing for anybody who's going to be watching. And again, if you're watching this and you want to support the MS-150 ride, then do check out the donation link in the description below, and and your support is much appreciated. Now, so we've got the basically 12 videos, I've created 8% of my progress. And so that's what I mean by leading indicators. So in the case of like marketing and sales, what we would do is, if we wanted to hit our target of, say, 5 sales a week, we knew that we would have to knock on 50 doors every day. That would allow us to make 5 to 10 presentations, which would lead to maybe 1 or 2 sales every day. And so now the thing is, a sale is a lagging indicator, which is directly supported by us putting in that work. Similarly, a leading indicator with relation to readiness is time on the saddle. And so that's where the 36 checkpoints come into play. And what I've done here is I outlined several rides that are essentially minimum round trip is 10 miles. So if it's a 10-mile round trip, it becomes 1 checkpoint. So for example, you got the Richmond Railroad Museum, or is it Rosenberg? I'm not sure. It's a railroad museum here near Richmond. It's a 10-mile round trip, so that's 1 checkpoint. Something like my kid's school, which is 26 miles. And so because it's 20 miles, they didn't hit the 30-mile mark. That counts as 2 checkpoints. The Gracie Baja locations, the places I train, for example, Gracie Baja West Chase, it is round trip is 48 miles, 24 miles one way, 24 miles back, 48 miles. So therefore it is 4 checkpoints. But Gracie Baja River Oaks, that's 56 miles round trip. So therefore that becomes 5 checkpoints. So any one of these rides, that's how many checkpoints I award myself with relation to progress. I want to hit a total of 36 checkpoints within the next 12 weeks. And that brings me to this portion right here, right? And so what I've done is I've marked 12 weeks. And so this week here, today is the 11th. So, but I had created the outline for this plan last week, and today is when I actually just put it on the whiteboard. It was a couple hours of caffeine induced flow state that allowed me to kind of put this all together. By the way, I feel like anybody who has any aspirations for accomplishing anything, get yourself an empty wall, get yourself a ideation whatever this is. It's not a whiteboard, but it is it's a sticker, right? It's a big sticker, and it's really, really smooth. You just got to make sure that the surface that you're attaching it on has been sanded down, has been made smooth and wiped down, so there's no dustiness. And then you can put this on. Just make sure you're putting it on straight using a leveler. Having this is amazing. Now, and for myself, one of these is good for one major specific objective and key result that you want to do, and the ideation space is great. Now, alternative is having a whiteboard paint, but I've done that in the past, and whiteboard paint isn't as good as the stick-on stuff. This stuff is actually the residue on this. This is not my first time. One of the martial arts dojos that I was coaching at, we had an entire wall just dedicated to that. And those are pretty good. So this is something that I would highly recommend. And it also, because it's not taking up the entire wall, you are still confined in a way that allows you to be a little bit more structured. And for me, I've also given myself some additional space, some additional notes with, these are the whiteboards I had before, but I feel like it's important to have some spillover space. So this is where that goes. And there's some more additional stuff, additional notes that, again, spillover notes that are not directly related to the objective and key results in terms of the structure layout, but things that I still wanted to make a note of. That's where the extra boards kind of come into play. One of the things though I do advise, if you're going to have any spillover boards, make sure you get the ones that are magnetic. So little magnet that I've glued on the dry erase, that's good. Whereas these guys here, they're not magnetic at all. So, and the other upside of having a magnetic backboard, whatever the magnetic layer is underneath, it tends to be a little bit more sturdy. Whereas this one here begins to bow over time. As you can see, start to come out forward. It's not a big deal, but it's something that I would probably prefer 2 more of these to replace those. But it's not going to be something. Just a side note, forgive my tangent, but back to the basic structure. Once you're clear on your specific objective, right? What it is that you're achieving, why that objective is important to you, what are the key results that are measurable milestones in the training timeline that you're going to be putting down. And this is the kind of like, it's not timeline that's in the sense of like, these are the things that I need to hit from a measurable standpoint. These are milestones. So I'm looking at 1 checkpoint rides, 2 checkpoint rides, 3 checkpoint rides, 4 checkpoint rides. And we're also looking at, I need to do a back-to-back ride. That's something that is, I know that once I've done 2 back-to-back rides of like maybe a 30-mile, 60-mile or 60-mile, 30-mile, however that is, then I know for sure I'll be ride ready for the MS-150. And then you get clear on your leading indicators. And then this is where the breakdown happens on a weekly basis. And so every week, and I've basically done 12 weeks, 1 entire quarter. And that's where a good objective and key result layout is good for a quarter. Now you could extend it for a year, but in terms of my mental capacity to stay focused, a quarter is a good chunk, right? And so in this case, it's not a proper quarter. A proper quarter would be from January, February, March. In this case, we're starting almost mid-February and we're going until the end of April, right? And into the first week of May. And as you can see, that is the ride week. You'll notice here, one of the things I've also been clear on is that March is also going to be Ramadan. And so that's something I'm going to have to take into consideration and factor into what I'm going to be doing with relation to my training, shifting it to either the early morning or in the evening. And so one of the things I've actually put here is Ramadan routes, specifically to the different mosques in the area that I would want to check out, maybe for the evening prayers, probably go there for that, or maybe to break my fast at any one of these locations, perhaps. An idea that I'm going to be considering. But before I can even get to this, I need to ensure that I've been riding for at least 2 weeks. So these first 2 weeks are going to be critical so that when Ramadan comes, I'm not physically adapting to the activity. I'm already done. And this was one of the things that I had it's funny that I'm getting into this activity in a similar fashion with the challenge that I had when I started jiu-jitsu. And the key thing with jiu-jitsu here is I started in April of 2018, which was 2 weeks prior to the beginning of Ramadan at that time. And my whole idea was that if I can train through Ramadan, I have no excuse to miss training during the year. And I feel like that's going to be the same mentality and mindset going into this. If I can get into the ride, start training, get my strength training in, get my ride saddle time in 2 weeks prior to Ramadan, then within Ramadan I can continue that, and definitely into the weeks leading up to the ride. This is where all of the multi-checkpoint rides are going to be happening. So definitely something to consider. One final note with relation to goal setting. make sure whatever it is that you're pursuing that you have a genuine interest in. Whether it's, for me in my case, whether it's martial arts, strength training, jiu-jitsu, this multimedia storytelling, creative stuff, or cycling, just it's got to be something that you're interested in. Do you see a sense of novelty? So for me, I've never done the MS-150 as an official ride, right? Like on an official capacity. And so that's the novelty factor for me. And so, and for me to be able to document the whole thing, I've never done it like this. And so that's something that's definitely new and exciting for me. The other factor is the challenge factor, right? I mentioned earlier is that in this situation here, I need to, it is going to be a challenge, right? A number of factors. Ramadan is right smack in the middle. We've got my own personal thing of like proving to myself, can I do the long distance ride? In the sense of my last ride was a fail. And even in the ride prior to that I did succeed in, I was still cramping. Dehydration is a challenge that I have yet to master. And I feel like liquid IV might be the answer to that. I had non-hydration tablets, which I used before. I don't recommend, but liquid IV, I feel like may be a good alternative. Prior to that, I used to use a mixture of Himalayan salt, lime, and honey, coupled with dates and bananas. And that has been good, but it gets, there's a saturation point with that. And so it becomes a bit challenging. And also we're dealing with Houston, which is very flat for the most part. And so that ride might be, that facet might be a little bit challenging. The other thing is the curiosity factor, right? In the sense of what is the question that I'm seeking to answer for myself? What is unique and different about this challenge? Well, for me, it's just the approach that I'm taking, the focus that it's giving me. And the other curiosity factor would be is I've, in the sense of like getting to see Houston as part of preparation, getting to know the new neighborhood that I'm in, all of that is going to be new, unique, and different for this particular ride. And so there's also the sense of urgency, right? There's a deadline here. And so I know I'm going to be enrolled into riding, but there's also the deadline of raising the $400. So there's that urgency factor that has been associated, and you know, we got Ramadan coming up, so I know there's certain milestones and markers I definitely have to hit before the month of Ramadan comes in. So that definitely plays in. And the last aspect has to be is so I started with interest, but the real question is what's the passion that you're going to be addressing, that's going to be fulfilling you. When in my case, there's the joy of simply riding the bike, and the idea and the passion of staying fit. The other thing I need to make a note of is like I guess in the last year or so, my success on the ride on the saddle has also been directly related to where I'm at in my fitness level. Not so much like because fitness is on a number of there's a number of markers that determine an individual's fitness level, right? There's the performance indicators, right? With relation to your strength standards. Are you able to squat, deadlift, pull, push, press a certain amount of weight in unilateral and bilateral movements, whether it's like unilateral. So the idea that can you bench press versus dumbbell press, right? That's an example of like, do you have good control and movement to a particular standard? There's also mobility and flexibility standards, and do you have strength in a particular position and movement? A lot of that for me is clearly indicative within the sport of jiu-jitsu and martial arts in general. Then there's the endurance standards, right? So being able to ride, being able to walk, being able to run, be active. So those are performance indicators. And so although I've made a lot of progression on the martial arts side, I feel like I've stagnated on the strength and conditioning side. And I think part of that is due to going so heavy into this over the last 5 years that I've neglected the strength training, and I've also neglected the bike riding. And so this activity here is something that is gonna jumpstart this. And part of being able to support myself in this is also doing some more of the weightlifting. And in addition to the weights, I recently got these from a friend who was getting rid of their weights. But in addition to getting more weights, it's also joining a gym membership and finding where it would fit within my, general schedule. So that way I'm not having to make time for it. I don't have to go out of my way. It's in my way. And so therefore I'm able to do these activities. And so the key thing here is that because this has been neglected and the strength training has stagnated, the waistline is something that tends to grow. And being South Asian, that's never a good indicator, especially considering that diabetes and heart disease is something that runs rampant within the South Asian community. And so your waist size in your inches is a major determinant of whether or not you're in a good place, despite having good cardiovascular ability and good martial arts ability and good endurance ability. But your waistline, which is a direct relation to your nutrition, that's going to be another thing. But the question here is, for me, it's a question of like, and maybe I'll put that as an additional lagging indicator, which is I should put here waist inches target value. What is my target value? So right now my current value is I have a 38 plus inch waist, right? And that means, now that depends on how much I've eaten. And so the question is, can I make it down to a 32 inch waist? Now that for me is super lean. The other indicator is also currently I'm about 225 pounds. What I want to do is I want to break 195. That would be my ideal weight. And so I'll just kind of put that there. This is not dependent, me reaching this is not dependent on that, but it's a lagging indicator. It would be nice to have. And it's going to be more or less determined by my nutrition as well as intake. And I think one of the key thing here is a lot of that is going to be determined on what is my calorie deficit, right? So here is a weekly deficit of 3,500 kilocalories, maybe even 5,000 per week. So if we do this now, if you're wondering why this specific number, a 3,500 calorie deficit per week is going to result in about 1 pound lost. And so the question is, if you want to lose, say, 12 pounds in 12 weeks, then you would want to be a minimum 3,500 calories deficit per week. And that comes down to your nutrition. Now, in my case, that might be actually a little bit unrealistic. And so 225, if I were to bring that down to say, if I wanted to lose 30 pounds, that means I would need to adjust this number some more. And so, but I feel like naturally the fact that Ramadan is going to fall right smack in the middle of it is going to contribute to that. And so it's just a matter of staying disciplined. So this is something I need to revisit. Let me just make a note for that, and I'll just say revisit and clarify. Ooh, there you go. Anyway, hope you guys found this video helpful. Now, part of the reason why I'm also doing this is with relation to accountability and check-in and committing. In terms of being committed, I'm already signed up. People in the group, accountability and check-in. This will hopefully increase my chances of achieving this goal and being ride ready for the MS 150. by 95% success probability. And so wish me luck, make dua, and I hope to see myself succeed and I hope you succeed at the highest level. I'll see you soon.